Some say the moon. Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
As World War II ended in 1945, a new global rivalry soon emerged. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin's takeover of Eastern Europe in the late 1940s set the stage for this clash of the United States versus the one-party communist system of the Soviet Union, known as the Cold War, which pitted the world's two great powers against each other. Beginning in the late 1950s, space would reach a new dawn. Space would become the dramatic arena for this competition. By the mid-1950s, the U.S.-Soviet Cold War had worked its way into the fabric of everyday life in both countries. Fueled by the arms race and the growing threat of nuclear weapons, war in Korea, and the clash of words and ideas carried out in the media, these tensions would continue throughout the space race, exacerbated by such events as the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and the outbreak of war in Southeast Asia. Space exploration served as a dramatic arena for Cold War competition. On October 4, 1957, a Soviet R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite and the first man-made object to be placed into the Earth's orbit. While the Sputnik launch was a single event, it marked the start of the space age and the U.S.-U.S.S.R. space race. In 1958, the U.S. launched its own satellite, Explorer 1. Designed by the U.S. Army under the direction of rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, in that same year, President Dwight Eisenhower signed a public order creating the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA, a federal agency dedicated to space exploration. President Eisenhower also created the spearheaded U.S. Air Force, which dedicated itself to exploiting the military potential of space, and a new organization called the NRO, which was codenamed Corona and kept classified until the early 1990s. It would use the orbiting satellites to gather intelligence on the Soviet Union and its allies. As the space race was heating up in 1959, the Soviet space program took another step forward with the launch of Luna 2, the first space probe to hit the moon. In April 1961, the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to orbit Earth, traveling in the capsule-like spacecraft Vostok 1. The U.S. effort to send a man to space, named Project Mercury, NASA designed a smaller, cone-shaped capsule far lighter than Vostok, which was tested with chimpanzees and held a final test flight in March 1961. On May 5th, astronaut Alan Shepard became the first American in space, though not in orbit. Later that May, President John F. Kennedy made the bold public claim that the U.S. would land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. In February 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth, and by the end of that year, the foundations of NASA's lunar land program, Project Apollo, were in place. December 1968 saw the launch of Apollo 8, the first manned space mission to orbit the moon, from NASA's massive launch facility on Merritt Island near Cape Canaveral in Florida. On July 16, 1969, U.S. astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins set off on the Apollo 11 space mission, the first lunar landing attempt. After landing successfully on July 20th, Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon's surface, calling the moment, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." By landing on the moon, the United States effectively won the space race that had begun with Sputnik's launch in 1957. For their part, the Soviets made 4 failed attempts to launch lunar landing craft between 1969 and 1972, including a spectacular launch pad explosion in July 1969. From beginning to end, the American public attention was captivated by the space race, and the various developments by the Soviet Union and the U.S. space programs were heavily covered in the national media. This frenzy of interest was further encouraged by new medium of television. Astronauts came to be seen as the ultimate American heroes and earthbound men, and women seemed to enjoy living vicariously through them. Soviets, in turn, were pictured as the ultimate villains with their massive, relentless efforts to surpass America and prove the power of the communist system.